So, I've just caught up to date on the Stormlight Archive. I just finished reading this absolutely mammoth series. I'm up to date, and I've never made a video before, but I finished Oathbringer, and I was so hyped, and I was so excited, and I haven't felt this way about a book series in what feels like forever, and I have to talk about it. So before I get into why you should read it, I should probably tell you where I'm coming from as a reader. So I've loved fantasy since I was a little kid. I grew up with Harry Potter, I loved it, I loved Lord of the Rings, and of course, like everybody else, I was watching Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones brought my love of reading back. I was watching the show, and I couldn't wait for the next season. I had to know what was going to happen next. So I bought the books, and I was lost in this world, and it was incredible, and I loved it. And as many of you guys know, the show kind of dropped the ball towards the end, and we're still waiting for the next. We're still waiting for the Winds of Winter, and I was excited, and then I was disappointed, and then now I was kind of indifferent by this point, and I wanted a new series, but I also wasn't bothered because I was a bit let down. And my friend messaged me one day, and he said, "Dude, you have to read this fantasy series I'm reading right now." And I was like, I wasn't that keen. I was a very hard sell. I was like, okay, why do you want me to read these massive books? And he couldn't really explain it to me. He just said, just trust me, just pick up the first book, and I promise you'll get into it. And he was absolutely right, but I'm here to try and give you a really convincing reason why you need to pick up the Stormlight Archive and start right now. So we're only 3 books into this series. I know it looked like I was holding so many. It's because my editions are split into 2 parts each. Maybe because there's too many pages, maybe just to make some extra money, I'm not too sure. But the first book I have in one complete edition, The Way of Kings, this chunky dude is 1,100 and something pages of pure setup for an awesome 10-book series that's going to come out. And I should start telling you about the world. This is what immediately caught my attention with this book. So the story takes place on the world of Roshar, and what's happening in Roshar is there are these giant high storms, and these high storms rip through the world, mess everything up, and everything around the world, all the humans, all the people that live there have built their lives around these high storms because they're so destructive. All buildings are built in mind to protect you from the storm. We have storm bunkers. All of the ecosystem has adapted to these high storms. So grass, if you walk near it, goes back into the ground. Plants have hard shells that then expand once the storm is over. Everything is tied to how these storms go through the world, and it's so awesome just to see all these little things happening that you wouldn't have really thought of, but are so smart and so cool. Many of the animals in the world have hard shells and are very like crustaceans. We've got these creatures called chulls, and they're like giant crabs that pull carriages and that, you know, people ride. Horses are a very kind of rare thing in Roshar, so it's so cool being in a world that's actually so different from most fantasy. One of the first things you'll notice when you read the Stormlight Archive and are visiting Roshar is these creatures called Spren. Now, Spren are these sprightly little things, little creatures that appear in all sorts of places. There is a Spren for every occasion. Many are tied to human emotions. So we have anger Spren, we have anticipation Spren. These will pop up, and they all have their own unique shape and kind of personalities, you could say. They're Spren not just for human emotions, but for elements of nature. So there are wind Spren that are zipping through the air. They're oh my god, now I'm drawing a blank. But there are a lot of types of Spren, and this was the first thing that struck me in this world. I was like, there is so much going on. What you'll learn if you stick with the series, and if you know anything about Brandon Sanderson, the author, is nothing in the world is really just there. everything goes so deep. Everything goes so deep. There's a reason for everything. And Spren were one of those things that I thought there's definitely more to these little guys, and it was so cool getting little tidbits of information about the Spren throughout. So look forward to that. Another thing to mention about the world is the class system. The class system is totally determined by your eye color. So if you have dark eyes, unlucky, you're in the lower class of society, and if you have light eyes, you are upper class. Within light and dark eyes there are kind of ranks, you could say, but basically light eyes, your life's not too bad. Dark eyes, yeah, it's not great. One last thing I will mention about the world before I move on to characters is the currency system. The currency system is connected to the storms, and Stormlight specifically. So what they do is they leave these spheres out in the high storms, and they are infused with Stormlight. So this is used as their currency, these spheres that are coloured with Stormlight. It's also used for lights around the world. So if you're a bit more wealthy, you can, instead of using fire or candles, no, can't do with that. We'll use some Stormlight infused gems, and it creates such a colourful setting for all the chapters that you're reading. After the prelude, which I won't even get into, it starts off, our first chapter starts off with an assassin named Seth, and Seth is on a mission to kill the king of Alethkar, which I won't even get into the different factions and places. He's off to kill the king, and he doesn't want to, but he has to for whatever reason. And immediately you learn that Seth can do some cool stuff. He can basically use lashings which change which way is down, or gravity you could say. So he can run on walls, he can just flip in the air, and now down is up is down, left is right. He can do all this awesome stuff. He can do this to objects, to people, and he is fueled by Stormlight. He can inhale it, and it kind of enhances these abilities. Seth has a weapon called the Shard Blade. Now, Shard Blades are a type of weapon in Roshar that are quite rare, and they are these weapons that can be summoned and summoned into existence after 10 heartbeats, which is just so cool, and they kill in one slice. If you don't kind of do a kill shot, whatever limbs it hits, that limb is rendered useless. Okay, so he kills the king. This starts a giant war between humans and the Parshendi, and the Parshendi are like a humanoid type of creature, and this war is happening on the Shattered Plains. The Shattered Plains are what I imagine is somewhat like the Grand Canyon. These giant plains separated by gaps, where they're both fighting each other. So we'll start with the main character, who I would consider Kaladin, especially in the first book. Kaladin you meet as a squad leader. He's in battle, you see that he has amazing skill with a spear, and you think, wow, this guy's awesome. Very soon after, it cuts to Kaladin as a slave, so something has gone wrong, but you are not sure why, and you're teased throughout the book. What has happened to make Kaladin a slave? You get Kaladin's flashback scene chapters within this book, and usually I'm not a fan of these, but these are done so well, and you get the full story of his childhood up until that first scene with him in a battle and why he became a slave. And Kaladin meets a Spren. This Spren is named Syl, and Syl is a wind Spren, and it's very uncommon for a Spren to actually be somewhat sentient and can have a conversation with you. And she comes in the form of a young lady and starts talking to Kaladin, and they start building this relationship, which is super duper intriguing. So we find out Kaladin is being sent to the Shattered Plains to work as a bridgeman, and a bridgeman is part of a team that carry these giant bridges over their heads, run headfirst into archers from the Parshendi. They put the bridges down so the human army can go across and have their battle. It's basically a death sentence. If you are in a bridge crew, you're probably going to get an arrow and you're probably going to die. So you are with Kaladin's struggle in his bridge crew, and I'll basically leave you there because I don't want to say too much more about him. I was in a dark place when I read this book, and the slow crawl of Kaladin out of this hole is just really, really rewarding. It's a great look at depression. It's a great look at pulling yourself out of the worst of situations. Another one of our main characters is Shallan. Now Shallan is a light eyes young lady, and she is going to try and be the ward of a highborn lady, the sister of the current king, Jasnah Kholin. And Jasnah is an intellectual. She does not believe in any religion. She's all about science, she's all about facts, and Shallan is very interested in this. Her family's in a bad place and she needs the help of Jasnah. So Shallan's story is learning under Jasnah, learning more about the world of Roshar, and there's a lot more to it which I really can't get into, but it is incredible. Another main character we follow is Dalinar, and Dalinar is really interesting. He is the brother of the king that was murdered by Seth right at the beginning of the story. Dalinar is at the Shattered Plains, leading the armies that are fighting the Parshendi. The armies are separated into about 12 different groups run by different high princes. And the problem is, it hasn't become so much about avenging the death of the king as more about getting gem hearts. And gem hearts are found within these creatures called chasm fiends, these really intimidating massive creatures. And basically the Parshendi and the humans race to these chasm fiends, and it's more about who can kill it and get the gem heart to earn wealth rather than actually fighting each other. And Dalinar is getting visions in High Storms where he's being told to unite the humans because something bigger is coming, there's greater things at stake, but people are in constant disbelief of him and people are not keen, okay? It's very difficult for Dalinar to actually get them all together on the same page. A very interesting character. Not many people believe what he's going through, but you do, and you are on board for the ride. Dalinar also has a shard blade, and he has shard plate, which is armor made of a similar material, which is the only thing that can deflect a shard blade. By the end of The Way of Kings, you will be literally screaming at the climax. Many of people have talked about this now, but it's called the Sandalanche. Now, Brandon Sanderson has a crazy avalanche snowball effect of all the storylines coming to a head right at the end. Every plot point, everything climaxes at the exact same point. I don't know how he does it. At the end of each Stormlight book, it seems to get crazier and crazier. When I was finishing Oathbringer the other day, I was literally screaming my head off. It was insane. The end of The Way of Kings is such a satisfying ending, and it's so gratifying, and it sets up everything so well, and you're just primed for 10 books. It's like, just give them to me. This series has some of the most epic moments I've ever experienced, whether it be from a movie, series, or book. There are some moments in this book that left my jaw completely dropped. Some moments in this series where you just think it's just pure brilliance, and it is so worth it. Some people might say The Way of Kings is incredibly slow, and I would say it is a little bit slow to start, but every chapter you get a little bit more. You get a little bit more about the world, you get a little bit more about the characters. You're constantly intrigued, and at the beginning, when you aren't so attached to the characters yet, there is always a little bit more that keeps you keep getting drip fed, and you just got to keep going. And what I said earlier, how I've just been indifferent towards A Song of Ice and Fire now because we've been waiting almost 10 years for the next book. You are in good hands with Brandon Sanderson. This guy accidentally writes books. He is like, it's like he's tied to his computer. His imagination is endless and his work ethic is impressive. These books, 1,000+ pages each, have come out every 3 years or so, 3 to 4 years. In between that, you get his other series. This guy's releasing a book a year at the very least. So you have no worries about having to wait or be in a lull period with this series. It's a perfect time to jump in. What makes it an even better time to jump in is the 4th book, The Rhythm of War, is coming out in November, and mate, I am primed. I'm ready to absolutely devour this book. So it's a great time to jump into the Stormlight Archive, and it's a great time to get into an epic story.